It's 7:01 p.m. We're running late already. To our regular July 16th Waverly City Council meeting. Roll call, we're called to order. Roll call, please.
Bergen.
Here.
Rinkow.
Here.
Angus. Here. McKenzie.
Here.
Rafi. Here. Sheriff.
Present.
Waldstein. Here.
All present and accounted for. Next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. I'd entertain a motion, please.
Move approval of the agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Approve the agenda. Any questions, comments? Hearing none. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Motion carried, 7-0. Next item is approval of the minutes for June 18th, 2018, regular meeting minutes, and the June 25th, 2018 study session minutes. Is there a motion, please?
I move approval of the June 18, 2018 regular meeting minutes and the June 25, 2018 study session meeting minutes.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any comments, questions? Those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Minutes approved. Before we move on any further, I believe our guest council person for the month of July is here. And Mike, would you do the introductions, please?
Well, I'm pleased to have Susan Cornforth with us. Susan had an excused absence last time, so this is her first meeting. And I don't want to say too much because I think Susan should say something about who she is. What I know about her is that she's a valued employee at Self-Help, which is a bright spot in our community. And maybe I'll just let her tell you what she thinks you should know about her.
Very good. Susan, please.
That's probably fine. As Mike said, my name is Susan Cornforth, and I've lived in the community, I believe, we're just past 16 years now. We moved here on the 4th of July and came through Shell Rock with our truck at 10 o'clock at night. It was an interesting introduction to the community. We've had a child go all the way through school here, so we've been very invested in the community pretty much from the time we moved here. I do work, as Mike said, for Self-Help International. I run the U.S. operations here in Waverly. And I also, some of you may recognize me as a poll worker for Ward 4. I generally work up at Redeemer Lutheran there. So I have a long time investment in local politics, and I love living in Iowa where people care about them. So I'm very glad to be invited. I really appreciate it, and I'm sorry I missed last time.
Very good. Thank you. As Mike may have explained to you, you can take part in any discussions that you would like. The only thing that they will not let you do is vote. But we certainly entertain any discussion that you'd care to offer to us. So, next item is a presentation of a plaque of recognition to the Historical Preservation Commission for the City of Waverly. This is from the State Historical Society of Iowa. I believe hopefully there's some commission members here.
Back here.
Very good, thank you. If you'd join me in front of the step over there, that'll make the newspaper happy. Front and center, right. And, maybe introduce yourselves, or one of you introduce all the rest of them first.
Well, sure, I can do that.
All right.
Don Meyer, Chair of the Historic Preservation Commission, and two of our commissioners here, Linda Hugden and Karen Lehman.
Very good, thank you. I know that someone spent an awful lot of time getting this bridge paperwork done, so it got on the National Historic Record. So it's with great pleasure, Don, that I present that to you and the commission, and you may place it wherever you'd like, and maybe pass it around between the commission members or something like that. But thank you for all your work and your effort.
Very much.
What's a photo?
Should I hold the plaque?
Yeah, that'll work fine. So. Okay, very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Next item is a public hearing. This is the date and time and place for public hearing on an ordinance providing for rezoning of property owned by the city located along 15th Street Northwest and 16th Street Northwest by 3rd Avenue Northwest from R3 multiple family housing residential 2 to 4 units to R4 multiple family residential apartments 5+ units. The mayor and council will entertain any comments from the public. For a little clarification, this is property that the Waverly Homes has purchased along with a little bit of city property up back of the low-rise Waverly Homes, the original part of the complex up there at the corner of 15th and 16th and 3rd Avenue Northwest. So, anyone here that cares to speak to that? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. Did we receive any oral or written comments, Carla?
We did not, Your Honor.
Very good, thank you. I would entertain a motion.
I would move the second reading of ordinance 1050, an ordinance providing for rezoning of property owned by the city located along 15th Street Northwest and 16th Street Northwest by 3rd Avenue Northwest from R3 multiple family residential 2 to 4 units to R4 multiple family residential apartments 5+ units.
Is there a second? Second. Motion made and seconded. Council discussion. Roll call vote, please.
Bergen.
Yes.
Drinkow.
Yes.
Kangas.
Yes.
McKenzie.
Yes.
Rafi.
Yes.
Beer.
Yes.
Holstein. Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item number 2, this is the date, time, and place for public hearing on the approval of an amendment to the Centennial Oaks Plan Development to create parcel RR for R1 residential purposes, an amendment to the future land use map and approving plat for parcel RR, which is just off of 29th Avenue and side of 11th Street, south or southeast. So, any written or oral comments?
There were no written comments, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. I'll open the public hearing. Anyone here wishes to speak to this proposed amendment?
Hi, I'm Mark Everett. I live at 3204 Powell, Cedar Falls, Iowa. I'm here representing a parcel of ground known as Breezy Hill Minor Plat. That's corner of 29th Avenue Southeast in Fairview, and it's immediately south of the property that's under consideration. When we first looked at this property, we were immediately drawn to it because of the uninterrupted views that it provided for the golf course, which was then Centennial Oaks Golf Course. We discussed it, and after our due diligence, knowing that people will pay a premium for views of a lake, mountain range, the ocean, golf course, what have you, we decided to purchase it and develop the property with the intent of offering 4 or 5 extremely nice home building sites for those looking for a golf course view, which we have done. And now that we've been approached with this, or we've been confronted with this, I certainly can state without question that had we had any idea that green space that abutted our property on the golf course would ever be considered as a single-family residence, we never, ever would have chosen to be involved in this project. That pretty much just destroys everything that we were hoping to accomplish there. And at this point in time, based on several appraisals that we have, we believe that our lots, our individual lots, are in the range of anywhere from a low of probably 100,000 up to maybe 120, 125, depending on the availability for a walkout and so on and so forth. I've got a small schematic here. Can I turn this on? Somebody turn it on for me. Thanks. Everybody got that in front of them, or is that just on that screen?
We got it here.
Okay, thanks. I've got a little visual here of my Breezy Hill lots and the parcel that's under consideration. Coming from the west going east, we've got lots 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We've got the 5th tee box, the 5th green, and the 6th tee box on the golf course. And this is not exactly the scale, but it's fairly representative of what's being asked here. This is the parcel that's under consideration, and the property, as I understand it, could be put here, and obviously it can slide a little bit either way. But you can see that lots 1 and 2, I'll be honest, aren't going to be impacted too much. 3, 4, and 5 will. 3 and 4, lots 3 and 4, they're going to be looking across someone's rear yard, having to deal with evening activities, weekend activities, possibly look past a swing set fence if it's allowed, fire pit, whatever might go back there. That certainly was not the view that we intended that we anticipated when we bought that land and developed that. And as we move on down to lot number 5, you can see that its view of the green, number 16, is most likely going to be completely blocked. And its only view then would be across the backyard to see 5T and then on down the golf course, which is 4 green and 6 fairway and a couple other holes on the backside. So 3 of our lots are definitely going to be impacted. And after speaking with an appraiser, once we found out that this was on the table, I just asked him to give me a rough idea of what he thought the impact might be. Doesn't think 1 and 2 will be impacted at all, shouldn't be. 3 and 4, he said, depending on the buyer we get, could be impacted up to 30 to 40% of their value. Number 5, we could see a reduction in 50 to 60% of the value. And at the numbers we're looking at, that's a substantial amount of money. I might also point out that this proposal went before your P&Z Commission 2 separate times, and in both cases was soundly rejected, 6 against, 0 for the first time, 5 against, 1 for the second time. They just didn't feel that this was an appropriate use of that land, being it's within the confines of the golf course. And now to allow a structure within the golf course boundaries, if you will, rather than having it have been platted from the beginning. They didn't like losing the green space, and again, basically, not to repeat myself, but they just didn't feel it was appropriate. It's a little bit odd, because this is fairly rural. The Riggs family have property here, and then I and my partner are the only owners of lots 1 through 5, but I just can't imagine that if we had sold these and someone else other than myself owned them, that they wouldn't be here voicing the same concern that I am. You know, it's a little bit of an anomaly in that you've got 100% representation for the people that had to be notified, and that's just basically me. But I do think that a reasonable person would believe that had someone else purchased those, that they would feel pretty much the same way that I do about the impending construction of a property right out their backyard or back door. You know, I've talked a little bit about why we got involved, what our vision was, our investment, and the real proper and the value reduction that could occur if we wound up seeing this pass tonight. And I just think this is such an unusual request that if it goes forward, it might set a precedent that you may have to deal with something that's as unusual as this down the road, and they could use this as an example. Don't know that that will happen, but once that door is open, it's kind of hard to close it. So I would ask respectfully that you vote no on this proposal tonight. I don't think it's the right use for that land. I think it should remain golf course land, undeveloped, and I hope you'll see my point. I hope you'll agree with my point. Thanks for
Very
hearing.
good, thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ken Riggs. A little background on myself. We moved here 22 years ago from Chicago to raise our 3 boys, and I think we've been successful. They're now 23, 29, and 30. My wife originally is from this area. And I guess to give you a little perspective, I live in Prairie Links currently, and then the home across the street that he references, those are my in-laws, and I know that's not in the city. So I live in Prairie Links. And a little more background, you know, I've been in real estate for 40 years. Still, you know, do that work at a national level or firm. But, you know, we've, you know, things that we've done here, I don't know if you remember the old Fast Stop, you know, that retail center we developed. That used to be a Fast Stop, we redeveloped that. We also, on the Big Six, took that project on, the end building, 99 East Bremer, and we redeveloped that end building, and we had our business in there for over 15 years. We sold that because we moved out to the center. And we also had the property near there. So I am you know, I've been invested in this community, both, you know, from a family standpoint, a business standpoint. We employ roughly here around 20 consultants. In Des Moines, we have about 50 consultants, and then we have offices throughout the U.S. And again, our focus is commercial real estate consulting is what we provide. So I just want to give that context. I think relative to, you know, Mark's covered these items, but again, I was also one of the investors in the last investment group that sold this to Dahlstrom as we went through the process. So what I would keep in mind is that this was a planned development, and this area was designated as semi-private, semi-public. And I'm still not sure what that means, because if you go and look in any of the zoning books, it's related to parks. So those are designated semi-public, which makes sense, is that someone else owns them, but the public has the enjoyment of that. So it was designated that way some 18 years ago. And there must have been a reason for it, because they did the other parcels they wanted to redevelop. They designated it at that time. They designated Tagalong Trail. They designated other areas. So from the beginning, this wasn't intended to be a lot. So I would keep that in mind. It was intended to be green space. And like I mentioned, I was one of the sellers of the investment group, and when Dahlstrom bought it, part of it was to convert the driving range to, again, it's going to be commercial now. And if you look back in the original agreement, that was supposed to stay green space the entire time. That's what John McKee had to give up in order to get the city to participate in this. And again, I respect that you removed that green space, because again, that allowed the golf course to be, I guess, Dahlstrom to purchase the property. But I don't think the intent, from my perspective, was to start going around the golf course. I mean, again, I live in there, and we're on the 15th hole. We've invested a lot, and we'll be here for a long time. So I would think about, you know, those factors, and it's green space. And I would say, I think I heard in the last session 2 weeks ago that the city council voted on a motion about it. It wasn't at all. I was here. They voted on the fact, what I mentioned to you, it's green space. They own 2 raw tracts within this development that they could develop, Tagalong. They also have the lots to the northeast, I call it. So they have around 40 lots that are platted, that are approved, and they can develop right now, this minute, tomorrow. They can do it, and they can sell those, and they have them for sale. So I think, back to the zoning commission, they looked at it, this is green space. They have, again, we've converted a lot of the other green space, and there was a discussion about, well, it's costly to maintain that, and one of the zoning individuals, you know, said, what do you mean it's no-mo? It's no-mo. And also, they have to maintain the whole golf course. So an excuse to take that out of, you know, the green space because it's costly, you know, just isn't valid. But I will say, I was here for the zoning meetings, and they deliberated this very carefully. And they talked about those things. What was the intent? This is currently semi-private, semi-public, I'm sorry. And again, we need the green space. Are they going to go around and convert it all? But that's all I wanted to share with you. And again, I understand specifically, I want you to know this, my perspective comes when we built that home. So I'm invested in that, through her parents. But again, I never, as a real estate person, and again, the owner in that partnership, ever thought they would go around and convert all these different spaces. So thank you for listening. And I appreciate the job you do. I know you commit a lot of time. I mean, who wants to spend their Monday, 9 o'clock here? So, but thank you very much.
Very good, Ken, thank you. Anyone else have something to say?
Hi, my name is Corey Hinkie. I'm here representing Prairie Links. I want to thank everyone for their time and interest in looking into this application request. I'm actually going to take kind of a different direction with this tonight. What this process has had us really take a look at what we have to offer as amenities, where we are going to be developing lots, what's going to be coming next to Prairie Links in the future with an age-diverse building and development. And we kind of started to think that, we don't really want to have just the pool and the golf course as an amenity, that we wanted to have a walkable area. We have 23 lots coming with tag-along trail. And so I think our vision is not only to have the pool, the golf course as amenity, but I think we're going to take back our application and move forward at this space with the community garden, something that the residents of Prairie Links around there can use, and the future residents of the building next to Prairie Links can use, and really add some more amenities to the area. So I think, with a couple of folks that were speaking tonight, I think that would answer some of their concerns. And, that's why we appreciate the process and we appreciate the discussion, and I think it's really led us to a better solution and something that I hope we all can agree will be an added benefit to the golf course out there. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Very good, thank you, Corey. Any other comments?
Can I just ask for clarification, Corey? Were you withdrawing your application?
Yeah.
Okay.
A little confused there, too, if that was an official withdrawal, or he was understanding if we didn't vote positively.
Can I ask a question? Can I only ask? I appreciate it. My question would be, if that happens, can they come back then? Because that's what can happen if you withdraw the application.
We would have to, I think they would have to wait a year. I think our rezoning requires that you wait a year. And I think even if, at this point, that it's been brought to the city council for consideration, that I would consider that
Casey's did the same thing and withdrew and then came back.
but they withdrew before they came to the city council.
It was on the city council agenda.
Okay.
I would respectfully like a vote, and again, just so we find out with that, and it's on the agenda, but again, if you can't, I understand it, but I respectfully would ask for a vote on this.
And I think what I've told them is that if we brought it here on the agenda, that it would take another year before they bring it back. And
That's correct. My understanding is if we vote on it and turn it down into a year, but I know Casey's was on the agenda and they asked for it to be taken off the agenda, and then they were able to bring it back a couple months later.
Oh.
That was-
My discussion with these is that we wouldn't let them bring it up again for another year, so I wouldn't put it on the agenda again.
So if we vote
If we
and we-
didn't vote, and if you do vote, fine, you can vote.
If we vote to allow the change to occur, then what happens?
Then they would have the option to do that, I assume. I don't know if they'd want to do that. They've really withdrawn their application, so it's,
I think if they withdrawn their application, I think it's a moot point for us to vote. I would be very
Yeah.
upset if we
Yeah.
went ahead with the vote at this point, because there's nothing to vote on because they've withdrawn their application. With all due respect to Mr. Riggs, I think that's the proper way to proceed.
and I would say in my opinion, it invokes the 12-month rule, because it had an opportunity to be heard today.
Right, but, and that's your counsel to us as.
Yes, I would tell you that-
as the city attorney and as the parliamentarian.
Right. I would not let them bring it back on the agenda for another 12 months.
Well, it was going to take a supermajority of council because it had been turned down by planning and zoning, so.
I mean, I kind of agree with Rod in terms of the voting. I understand the motivation for wanting us to vote, but I also think if in fact we don't have a motion and a second yet, and we have someone who submitted the application asking to withdraw it, then we don't have anything to react to.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, did we close the public hearing?
No, we have not yet. We need to close the public hearing at this point, so.
And I was just going to say, no, I respect that, and the only reason I brought it up, I didn't want to come back here every month
Yeah.
and go through this.
I don't
each
either.
time. So that was the only reason I was asking for it, is that I was afraid that each month we would come back, but if you can assure us that it's, well, I'm very comfortable, and again, I thank you for your time.
Very good. The public hearing is closed. The application has been withdrawn. I'm not sure the procedure, but apparently we're not going,
You can ask for a motion if nobody says anything. then you just move on.
Or you can just.
is there a motion to consider the resolution? For lack of a motion and second, the item is tabled, is withdrawn.
Could I just ask for clarification before we move on this particular item? For example, is it usual for us to bring an item to city council if the commission has twice recommended we not do it.
The way it's written is that the applicant can still bring it before the council. It just requires a supermajority
Supermajority.
of 3/4.
We just,
What happens sometimes, Mike, is it'll go to planning and zoning, and there may be, doesn't get a majority vote, there may be five of the 9 members there, and it'll be a 3-2 vote. And so technically it's turned down, but it was never formally turned down, it's just failed to pass the commission, so it could still come to us, but then we have a supermajority that we have to then vote for it.
it may have been a meeting that you were not in attendance, the Omni development to redesignate zoning for that, which is down on Third Street, southeast.
One of those got.
Yeah, that was turned down by planning and zoning, and the council overrode it, so.
But I would say the short answer to your question is that all actions are recommendations to city council from planning and zoning.
Yep.
Even if it's a unanimous, all-present unanimous decision, it's still, and I'm one who highly respects their work, but the fact of the matter is it always comes as a recommendation to us.
Even though everybody on planning and zoning says they don't like the
Yes.
idea. Seems a little odd, but I guess I get it.
Okay,
It's democracy at work, Mike.
are we comfortable with the decision that's been rendered?
I guess maybe to make it a little more formal than Corey's comments here, I would expect something in writing from,
I can get something in writing from them, yes.
so there's no misunderstandings and.
I'll probably clarify in sending my email that they have 12 months before they can bring it again. So,
I just had a question, Bill. Could you clarify the planned district zoning versus semi-public zone? I don't want
well,
to.
there's two different things you're talking about, because a planned development district is a zoning district. The designation of this as a semi-private or semi-public is just the designation that was put on the future land use plan. So it's when you're planning in the future what you're doing, it's really, they probably didn't know what to call it, so they called it something that was consistent with the hospital and LSI and Wartburg and these kind of things that didn't really fit in the other categories.
Which seems inconsistent.
Right.
Because those are all nonprofit.
Yeah, and I said before, I thought this was a commercial venture and probably should have been treated that way.
Okay. Moving on, public comments for any item that's not on the agenda. Is there anyone here that has something they would wish to bring before us? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent calendar. The following items will be acted upon on a single vote without discussion unless someone from the council or public requested a specific item be considered separately. Pay request from Farner Asphalt Sealers for the Slurry Seal Program 2018 for $58,162.70. Pay request from Stanley Consultants Incorporated for the Cedar River Parkway East improvements for 2018, $45,853.20. Pay request from Kramer and Associates for the Cedar River Parkway East improvements for 2018 for $140,641.95. Pay request from Clocky's Emergency Vehicles for the new 2018 ambulance for the Waverly Health Center's ambulance services for $185,101. Cash disbursements for June of 2018. The ambulance was in the 2018-19 budget. So
It came in under, actually, too. I want to make sure I mention that.
good. So entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar unless someone has an item.
Move approval of the consent calendar?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Motion carried. Regular business, approving Resolution 18109, resolution approving an audit agreement with Williams & Company, PC, for the next 3 years. Entertain a motion, please.
I'll move approving Resolution 18109, a resolution approving an audit agreement with Williams & Company, P.C. for years ended June 30th, 2018 for $32,500, June 30th, 2019 for $33,800, and June 30th, 2020 for $35,100.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Council discussion.
So we've been using the same company for like 20 years plus?
Close to that.
Close to that. And where are they based out of?
Lamar's.
Mars, okay.
Is there, I mean, these are fairly significant amounts. If it's a couple of $1,000s, I'm not sure we'd spend much time discussing it, but is there any procedure? I mean, let me back up here a little bit. Williams & Company I know is an excellent company, and my understanding is they do excellent audit work, but, so this isn't any disparagement against the company, but is there any procedure that we use when we're setting up these contracts? Is there an RFP or a comparison or anything along those lines, just to make sure that we're keeping these amounts in line with what other auditing companies might be charging?
I'll defer to Jennifer. I know this is not a RFP that we sent out. We did an extension of the current contract we had.
No, this is the first time that it had to be renewed since I've been here, and it was requested that they turn in an agreement or proposal.
I'm just not, I'm not familiar with how much auditing companies normally charge. I know there aren't that many companies that actually do audits for cities, so there's probably a limited universe out there of comparisons, but, you know, at some point, if we've been using the same firm for quite a few years, you know, there might be a reason that we would look and see if they were still within a reasonable range of charges. Because occasionally, you know, some companies can sometimes get more expensive, they price themselves out of the market, and if we don't look at what those fees might be, you know, we could be doing a disservice to the taxpayers by not taking a look at that, so.
Well, I do know with the comprehensive annual financial report that we do, it is quite extensive and does cost quite a bit of money to do that.
No, I'm sure, and I know they're a good firm. I know they do excellent work, so I'm not questioning our judgment using them or that. It's just that, you know, in my industry, usually every 3 years, you go out and do an RFP or something, if for no other reason, just to, you know, be doing your due diligence.
Sure.
So, you know, maybe 3 years from now, when we do this again, we might want to at least go out and do some due diligence and get some comparisons so that when it comes to the council, we know that we're in the ballpark with this company in terms of what we're paying them.
Sure, we could do that.
All right.
In the meantime, we can look at other cities our same size and see what they're paying for audit services. Because one of the difficulties we get into is we start jumping different auditors.
Yeah.
GASB keeps throwing out all these requirements that require a tremendous amount of work, and they're not cheap. Some of these are an extra $5,000 to $8,000 every year because somehow they're thinking of other things that we should be doing on top of just being a single audit. And when you switch out auditing firms, often you're going to lose a lot of bidders. You're going to lose a lot of that conduit to get this done correctly and quickly. I would definitely say after the 3 years, again, Jennifer just came here 3 years ago. I'm not quite in my third year. This is our first real look at this. I like to do a 3-year contract with a 3-year extension if we're comfortable with what they're doing, but I don't disagree. We should take a good look at what it's costing. Prior employer, we were well over double this. Our auditors were in the 70, 80, 90,000 range as a county, and I get it's different, but we can certainly look at other cities our size, see who they're using and what the dollar amounts are. It's all public information, and see if we're comfortable with this, and definitely report back to you on that.
I'm not suggesting, and I understand, I'm not suggesting that we, you know, go chasing the lowest dollar auditor. Because there's no question about it that when you switch auditors too often, that really creates some issues with the ratings companies. But I think just in terms of good business practices, just having your due diligence every 3 or 6 years to compare costs so we can have that in the file, say, yeah, they're still in the ballpark, you know, we're good to go on it. So. And
we'll certainly do that. Like I said, this is our 3rd year. It'll be our 6th year when this is over, and we'll look at that. In the meantime, we can certainly see what others are paying and get an idea of are we in that ballpark or not. And the hard part is other cities are different too, so that comparison is limited because depending on how they get their funds in, whether it be federal grants or not, it's all comparable to an extent. So we can dig into that and try and look at half a dozen or so cities similar in size and see what they're paying and who they're using. But you are correct, there are getting to be less and less audit firms that will compete in the state, and I really don't like to go too far out of state because we're different in Iowa, a little bit with the regulations. But we'll talk about that after the meeting. We'll definitely get some numbers so we know we're comfortable with what we're looking at right here.
If it helps, comfort-wise, granted, we're talking about a scale up, but we pay about $2,500 a year for $1 million budget. If you multiply that by the average budget of the city, which Mike tells me is about $22 million this year, that would make the audit cost of a comparable percentage $55,000. So from that perspective, like I said, maybe that helps you, but it's at least in the ballpark.
I know it's a completely different audit, though. This is, what you're doing is a straight
And I'm not
cash audit.
I'm just saying, comfort-wise, run little numbers, and it makes a little sense.
And I understand, but you're doing a straight cash audit. This is a comprehensive annual financial report. This is something that's comparable across every municipality in the country. It's a little elevated audit compared to just a straight cash audit. So I appreciate it, and I do. $55,000 would be really, really high for us if we were paying that. We wouldn't want to be.
It's even more of a bargain.
It's even
a better bargain.
I looked at that number and I thought, wow, I should share that.
Are we going to be obligated by, I forget the name of the new law that has all of the data stuff attached to it? I think that applies to quote-unquote financial institutions, but I know, for example, Wordburg falls under it as well.
Most likely, there'll be some version of it. Yeah, if it isn't now, they'll think of it enough to get us all to have to do it again and create some more issues. You know, it used to be GASB 34 was the big ugly one we went through. Now we're at GASB 78. That's how long this has come in the last decade or so, how many additional things they're putting on us to be audited on top. And so every auditor you get has to comply with this, and it is increasing the cost. And a lot of them are staying away from government because they really don't want to get into this continual effort to do this. And anytime federal money's involved, the paperwork gets thicker and thicker and thicker. As when Jeff's been here the last couple of years, he's shown that the amount of the audit has thickened. You know, instead of 10 to 12 pages, it's 50 to 100 pages with the same sections now because of these additional GASB standards. And it's not going to get any better. I only see them getting worse and getting to be more and more inclusive of things that used to not mean a lot. And a lot of it's just on paper. It's balance sheet. It has nothing to do with your cash flow. It just is a continual process of every year. You just look at what else is coming, and it's more and more and more to be done. So,
Well, if we do fall under the data security and data integrity, I mean, it is extremely prescriptive. I just spent last week looking at it for us and, I mean, for Wordburg, and it's overwhelming.
I'm sure if it's awful, we'll end up doing it. It's just the way it seems to work. Maybe it's GASB 105, I don't know. It's probably coming down the pipe. We'll get some flavor of it, I'm sure, as a city. So.
Okay, any further discussion?
I just like to note with this company that I think 7 of the 9 years that I've been on, we've had to reschedule the city audit because of bad weather when they come in February. So I kind of like keeping them on so I know when the bad weather's coming.
They're coming from Lamar's.
They come
It
from
seems like every
Lamar's
time
and
there's a
always seems in
snowstorm.
February.
Nice storm, something
Yeah,
like that.
usually something happens.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Caius.
Yes.
McKenzie.
Yes.
Rafi.
Yes.
Sher.
Yes.
Waldstein.
Yes.
Bergen.
Yes.
Drinkow.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item number 2, approving resolution 18-110, a resolution approving a donation of $50,000 by Omni Development LLC in satisfaction of the parkland designation required by Waverly Ordinance 103.6.07. Entertain a motion.
I will move approval of Resolution 18-110 as read by the mayor.
Second?
Second.
Motion made, second. Council discussion.
So what would be the timeline on completing such a bike trail?
Well, we've talked with TAB about what we could be planning for, whether we are planning to go straight east from First Street Southeast all the way across the detention area and then on the north line of the sewer plant, all the way to 8th, or whether we're talking about then turning across the soccer complex, or both. So it depends on how big of a project we want to do and when we want to do it. One of the things that we came up with on this is that we can only require the developer to actually set aside land or to do a project for us. We can't require them to give us money anymore. They can voluntarily do that. And so the Omni really did start designing this. They had an engineering firm that put together some site plan to look at how it would be placed, where they would have to put it, what effect it would have on the adjoining properties. And it became clear that it wasn't a real popular idea to start it behind Hy-Vee and go down to First. Because of the loss of trees and the way it would have to be placed, it would really have duplicated some other trails that the ledges had that wouldn't have substituted for it. So we started thinking about the First Street to the soccer complex and east as the alternative, and we started looking at plans to do that, and they were willing to do that. If they did that into that detention area and close to the soccer complex, it wouldn't have gone north across to the soccer complex or east to 8th Street, and so it was kind of a dead end at that point, which isn't probably a good way of doing it. So what we came up with is the idea that they were willing to give us the money to put aside, and the Leisure Services came up with this new plan of having a quasi-foundation fund that could be basically hold that money until such time as we use that as to get a larger grant, and it would count as our local donation, our local match in some of these grants that we apply for. So it would really help us probably accelerate that process of having more money available in the future. And I don't think it'll be that long, because I think our first idea was to go north into the soccer complex so that there's an access for people to get to and from the soccer fields. And actually, it's not too easy to stand over there when it's wet. It's kind of spongy, and if there was a road, or not a road, but a trail there that people could walk on and maybe stand on, it would be helpful for that complex. So those are discussions that Tab and his guys are going to have at some point about doing that. In the meantime, it sits in the fund waiting for us to do that project. So we think it's a great idea, and I want to thank Corey, because Corey was part of that team that we put together these discussions, and they were willing to do that, and we really thank them for that, because I think this is a good compromise. It turned out to be about 5% of the purchase price of that entire land, so it was about a 5% donation of ground in dollar amount, so I thought it was a fair compromise.
I just have a question. Is there a park out there, like with playground equipment and that sort of thing in that section of town? I can't remember.
There really isn't. When we talked about First Street being adjacent to the soccer complex and potentially green space across the road to the north to be used for things like maybe a park or other things, we just felt like we'd try to wedge something in that maybe wouldn't get used, or we couldn't put enough in it, maintain it, that kind of thing. So we thought about trail connections as being maybe a more valuable thing to get people on those trails to walk and to bike and to get to the other trail system. We wanted to get the trail systems connected. 3rd Street is already connected to First Street by a trail that comes down the street there from 3rd. There's an 8-foot wide sidewalk that is there for that purpose. So we're really connecting to that too. So we really think it would provide a good access for a lot of families to walk to that area, to go to the soccer complex, to walk across it when there's no soccer game going on, those kinds of things. Because once you get in there, there's sidewalks that go across to the east.
There are no playground equipment there. There's none.
But there's no playground equipment.
There are other additions. I mean, right or wrong, but there are other additions that don't have that either. Yeah.
Well, the whole Prairie Links doesn't really have much by way of playground equipment.
We just got our first kids a couple of years ago, so I mean, it's always been the old people that, now we're starting to get young families and younger people, and it's something to think about.
So, Bill, is this alternative of taking the money instead of land, is this something we do every so often, or is this a new precedent?
I'm hoping that we won't continue to do this, because if we have a good-sized area that we can actually find a good, appropriate place to place a park, we should be doing that if we can.
We used to, I know when I was on planning and zoning, we did it several times, and I always wondered about it, so I'm glad to hear that, that that's actually not desirable, but this is not precedent setting.
There's a combination of one street of residential, then you have the mixed use in the middle, and then you have commercial. So it really wasn't all residential development either. So the question was, what size do you really size for the residential portion?
Okay. Well, yeah, Edie's explanation is very helpful.
Well, I would like to interject that Corey was gracious enough to show me that proposed trail location, and I was ready to cry, to see those mature trees come out in order to accomplish that. So this is a very workable solution. So.
I went out and looked at it yesterday, and I agree that first proposal really was not a very good solution, and I think this is much better. I guess I do have a couple of questions, though, and I guess one issue is that I've heard from a number of people that live out there about not having any public play areas for children. I understand that this really isn't going to be a solution to that, but and I think that the trail is probably in this situation actually better than having a play lot that's going to be not really as accessible as we might want it. But when I looked at it, if I was looking at the map correctly, the 20-foot easement that we have in there is going to run between two houses on First Street. There's not a lot of room between those two houses. We actually do have a 20-foot easement?
Yeah, it's actually on the one lot, not on the other. So the one house on the north side that's in the new development is their property line is the property line, and then it goes 20 feet in from that property line.
Okay, that would actually come fairly close to their house, because
The first section next to the house was going to require probably some retaining wall along that section until you get past it into the backyard. Then it'll be more flat going out.
And the reason for not going ahead and doing $50,000 worth of trail now is just it would be more economical if we did it all at one time, or it'd be better to use the $50,000 to show it's match money, or I'm not sure I understand the reasoning.
I think that's both of those things. I think if we start the trail now and we expect them to invest $50,000 into this, it may not go all the way that we want it to go, and so it end up being a dead end in a place that maybe we don't want it to be.
Right in the middle of the water retention area.
or near the edge of the soccer complex. And there's some water issues that we have to design across when we go into the soccer complex, and we want to have their input and work with the soccer complex board on that.
So I think that would be an excellent place for a trail, frankly, to connect those.
We think so,
and
too.
it would be very highly used. So I think that's a project that we want to make sure we keep on the radar and move forward with.
But that was the biggest issue, was we knew it was going to stop, and then now what? And so we decided to know where if we can compound that money with some grant work and maybe get it completed, then it's a much better project that is done versus what's mostly done. And then how long will it wait, because we don't have matching funds, and it just seemed like a good option to use the fund that was set up to kind of get that started as well. And if we're holding that money, we maybe make a little interest off it or something, kind of help match that up. But otherwise, yeah, we're running up sidewalk right down the middle and stopping.
Which brings up another issue, and that is if for some reason that project doesn't go forward, what happens to the $50,000?
We can use that for other park purposes. I mean, it's identified as a trail connection for that, but if that came to be not doable, we could use it for another park project. And it could be done with combination of a trail and maybe an area that has some playground equipment, so we could do some of that.
But it would have to be dedicated to some kind of park-related project.
Right, exactly, yes.
Yeah, I think this is a nice idea, and I appreciate Omni's offer. I do have concerns about the lack of park area in some communities, or in some parts of our community. The northeast section of town, up behind the courthouse, has nothing. And so the kids are often using the streets to play in, and we don't have sidewalks on either side of the road up there. So it's, I think it's an issue we need to keep on the radar also, of making sure that new developments have, whether it's picnic space or playground equipment or something, because it's a long hike from out there to playground, so, and not every kid plays soccer, so.
Question, as you start to do your planning, will there be an opportunity to invite residents in that area to participate in that, or?
I think that, and especially the soccer complex, the board. I mean, obviously, we want their input because we're doing it to give access to people that are coming and going from the park, or from the soccer complex, but also to, when they're not playing, I see lots of people walking across there, walking their dogs. I mean, it's a great cut across to get to 8th Street. It works for both ways. I think it's just, it would enhance their getting people to see the soccer games too, I think, to be able to get to these
I just know that
fields.
the original design raised a lot of questions. I probably had more phone calls concerning it than, other than Casey's.
We heard a lot of those
It's
calls.
coming through my backyard, and it's taking out trees, and I know Billy and I talked about it a couple times way back when, but I think if we could get a few folks from that neighborhood, the original neighborhood to the south, at least extend an offer for them to be involved in the discussion.
Sure.
It'd be helpful in building acceptance for it. And
Sounds good.
I know you've talked about using the soccer complex and stuff, but if my recollection is correct, one of the original agreements with the soccer complex was they were supposed to put a fence around the entire facility. So that might be something to look at and think about with putting up.
I wasn't quite sure why they would want to do that necessarily, because,
Well, no, certainly on the north side with balls going towards the parkway, they would want, you'd probably want to have fencing there to restrain that. But I recall back, it was maybe, I don't know, a couple years ago when they were doing the paving of the lot or putting gravel lot in, we were looking at that. And it was something to do with whether it was the gravel lot was allowed versus they needed to have it paved. And then reading in that also that they were supposed to have it fenced also. So
I know
it's just something to keep in consideration.
they're doing a great job of maintaining that, and when we were able to get the license to give us that piece that they could fill in to add more parking there, it benefited. And just getting a connection back to the Parkway and to 8th Street, I think, is good for everybody in this complex. I think it's shown to be a pretty shining star for the community.
Well, we've strayed far off of the resolution. It's been a good discussion, but if we're not any other questions or comments concerning the resolution, roll call vote, please.
McKenzie?
Yes.
Rafi?
Yes.
Sher?
Yes.
Waldstein?
Yes.
Bergen?
Yes.
Drinkow?
Yes.
Angus?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Next item, approving Resolution 18111, approving the railroad agreement license for multi-use pathway sidewalk for the Fifth Avenue Northwest Railroad crossing location with Cedar River Railroad Company of Homewood, Illinois.
I'll move approving Resolution 18111, if you're ready for a motion.
I am.
Okay. Approving the railroad agreement license for multi-use pathway/sidewalk for the Fifth Avenue Northwest Railroad crossing location with Cedar River Railroad Company of Homewood, Illinois, for the payment of a $1,000 licensing fee. Again.
Motion made and seconded.
Again. Is that part of the motion again?
Yeah.
Well, the Fifth Street isn't yours.
This is the same agreement we just,
The same $1,000 we got.
we just passed for West.
It's a different $1,000, yeah.
I do have one question here, though, and that is along Fifth Avenue. There's currently no sidewalk, and I may have been, I know my memory isn't as good as it used to be, and I seem to remember that we talked about this at a previous meeting, but are there plans to put sidewalk along Fifth Avenue? There's no sidewalk on either the north side or the south side of Fifth Avenue.
So if you're familiar with that area, you'll notice that the roadway widens out at the railroad crossing. That is usually opposite to the way things are designed today, that because you do not want to allow any parking near the railroad and you want to confine the vehicles to really one lane in each direction, the design is to actually narrow the roadway at that point. So I think presently it goes from 35 to 42 feet, and we're going to take it from 42 to 31 feet. And so on the south side, we now then have space to put in at least a 5, and it might be a 6-foot sidewalk directly behind the back of the curb. Okay, so that's the idea, is to actually kind of constrain it, which tends to slow the traffic down. Again, we don't want parking there anyway because we want to have good lines of sight, and that allows for the sidewalk on the south side. There is sidewalk that was installed just to the west of there. There was a new, I think, 1 or 2 homes that were installed, and so there is a section of sidewalk there. We're probably going to be looking at connecting up to that, and then that is the start of the opportunity to provide additional sidewalk along the south side of the Fifth Avenue corridor.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Rafi?
Yes.
Sher?
Yes.
Waldstein?
Yes.
Bergen?
Yes.
Drinkow?
Yes.
Angus?
Yes.
McKenzie?
Yes.
Motion carried. Item number 4, approving resolution 18-112, approving the construction and maintenance agreement for the Fifth Avenue Northwest Railroad crossing location with Cedar River Railroad Company of Homewood, Illinois. Entertain a motion in a second.
I'll move approval of Resolution 18-112 as stated by the mayor.
Second.
Council discussion. Roll call vote, please.
Sher?
Yes.
Waldstein?
Yes.
Bergen?
Yes.
Drinkow?
Yes.
Angus?
Yes.
McKenzie?
Yes.
Rafi?
Yes.
Motion carried. Next item, approving resolution 18-113, a resolution accepting the slurry seal program 2018 project is complete and approving change order number 1 and pay estimate number 2 as final pay request to Farner Asphalt Sealers of Dubuque, Iowa. Entertain a motion in a second.
I'll move approval of Resolution 18113, a resolution accepting the slurry seal program 2018 project is complete and approving change order number 1 in the amount of a $42.05 decrease and pay estimate number 2 as final payment request in the amount of $8,024 to Farner Asphalt Sealers of Dubuque, Iowa.
Second.
Motion made, second. Council discussion. Did that accomplish what, Mike, what you would hope to, it to?
Yeah, I encourage everyone to go out and take a look at it. We have before and after pictures showing, the deterioration in the roadway and the slurry seal on top of it, so we're very pleased.
Very good. Any other comments, questions? Roll call vote, please.
Waldstein.
Yes.
Bergen.
Yes.
Rehkow.
Yes.
Angus.
Yes.
McKenzie.
Yes.
Ruffey.
Yes.
Share.
Yes.
Motion carried. Item number 6, approving second reading of ordinance 1049, an ordinance adding section 104.4.14, keeping disorderly house to chapter 104, public offenses, and providing for an amendment to section 23.05, applicable chapters of the municipal infractions chapter of the Waverly Municipal Code. Entertain a motion in a second.
I'll move the approval as read by the mayor.
Second.
Motion made and second. Council discussion.
I have a few comments to make on this, and then I want to propose a resolution. After thinking about this for the last 2 weeks and talking to a number of people in my ward, I have come to the conclusion that I was originally correct, amazingly, that this ordinance was really hurried and not well thought out. My biggest concern is that not all the stakeholders were invited to the table when this problem was being discussed. There were no landlords present other than Darrell Colson representing Wartburg. There were no renters present. There were no students present. There was only one neighborhood resident present. I don't think it's a good idea to move forward with this resolution or with this ordinance until we've considered input from all the stakeholders. Therefore, with that in mind, and I have a sheet for Carla, so she doesn't have to write this down if she doesn't want to. I move to postpone the second reading of ordinance 1049 until such time as a temporary advisory committee, as authorized under section 2.10 of the City of Waverly City Council Rules of Procedure, appointed by the mayor, consisting of owners, landowners, renters, Wartburg students, and such other groups that the mayor should choose to appoint, provides a report to the council recommending actions to be taken to preserve the peace and enjoyment of impacted properties in the city of Waverly. And I would appreciate it if one of my colleagues on the council could provide a second so we can discuss that resolution.
I will second.
Thank you.
Okay. Open for discussion.
Well, I will say, I believe part of the reason that we are on our current time frame for discussing this is so that this ordinance could be put in place before the upcoming start of the Wartburg school year, which is when we have a sudden influx of new renters in this community. So rather than having this rule come into effect partway through the year, there are benefits to having this rule in place when all of those new renters show up. So that's kind of my biggest concern with slowing down this process and having this task force in place is you're missing an opportunity for a kind of fresh start with new people moving in.
I understand that, and I understand wanting to have it in place, but I can hear Rod's concern that maybe we haven't fleshed it out quite as much as we want to, or certainly the affected parties would want to. I almost wonder if there's a way to, I don't know, ghost it or kind of set it over as a framework that allows for conversation and discussion as things happen this fall, as people, if not in place fully, but it's there, that helps to the conversation of, hey, this is what we're considering, this is what you're doing. If this gets put in place, you're going to get dinged for this. To maybe get some of that adjustment in behaviors done without having to bring in the stick necessarily. That they understand that there's there and that's there, and there's some discussion with the stakeholders to get to the same result, maybe, rather than put this in, have whatever growing pains we have with it, and then discover that maybe we should want to change back to some different things. And then it puts some things on people that they now have marks on their record that isn't there.
Rob, can I ask one clarifying question just to help me put this in context? This isn't just aimed at, restricted to rental properties. This is any property, correct? So while we certainly have a likely spot to apply it around the college, I know there's single-family owner-occupied houses right across from the fire station I would love to apply this to, as well as the neighbors around them. So I certainly understand. I'm trying to, as I read it, I don't know that we would come to a different conclusion or change much if we took the step back and did as Ron said. I think, in my analogy, the duck, we can see these things when they're happening, and they're not always rental properties, they're scattered throughout the community, so to pull in landlords, renters, the group that you're suggesting, to me seems well-intended, but maybe a little too much for what the simple goal, aim of this is to give us something to go talk to folks when they're not behaving well within the norms of the community and say, please change, or here's what's going to happen. And yeah, I guess knowing that this applies to more than just rental properties is helpful. Thank you.
Well, my concern here, Dan, is that normally as a council, we've tried to receive as much input as we could from the community in addressing issues. And this is an issue that has become quite egregious in the last few years. And I think that in order to discuss possible solutions to it, I think the proper way to do that is to get the community involved and get all the stakeholders involved and say, okay, what exactly are the problems? Let's agree on what the problems are, agree on what the issues are, and come up with some solutions that we can then apply across the board to see if we can attack this problem. One of the solutions probably will be an ordinance very similar to this. But I think rather than having a solution that we take a shot at as the council to say this is what we believe the solution should be and that this will fix the problems, I think is simply not very effective. I would prefer to have a more structured, long-term look at this so that we have all the people that are involved in having to that are affected by these issues are able to have some input into it. The section that about having a temporary committee requires to have public hearings, public notice. All of their deliberations are open to the public, so you can get input from any group of people, including the fire department, to discuss what are the problems and what can we do about it. I'm not opposed to having a ordinance like this passed, but I think that if we do pass it, that does not excuse us from really trying to address what some of the issues are, because I don't think this ordinance is going to get at the base issues. And we may find out that there is simply nothing we can do, that these kinds of issues with loud houses, drunken behavior, disrespectful neighbors, whatever, maybe only requires stronger enforcement from the police department to enforce nuisance ordinances or something along those lines. But at least we have engaged the citizens in helping to come up with some solutions and have them invested in what the outcome of those solutions might be.
I have a question. I'm hoping someone could help clarify for me. Where does this ordinance specify private property? Because I live 2 blocks from the fairgrounds, and I have the same problem with the fair. I'm just saying it's, and I guess I'm speaking in support of Rod's amendment that, or proposal, I'm not sure what you called it, but that perhaps the wording is a little bit more vague than we intend it to be. And I say that because as and that's about to become a moot point in the future when the fair goes away, but seriously, that's a concern for the people who live around other public spaces, not just the fairgrounds, but Kids Kingdom, which is a whole separate thing. Oops, I'm sorry, the pool. There are all sorts of public spaces in this town where this sort of activity goes on as well. And I don't think that the city intends to pass an ordinance that exposes the city to any kind of legal risk to have the same sorts of, I would hate to see that happen. I think that could potentially become an exposure to risk legally for the city if we don't specify, for example, private properties. I understand the impetus, being a neighbor to Wartburg as well, that it's not always easy to live with noisy neighbors and people who pee on your house, because it happens to me during the fair every year. But I'm in agreement that perhaps this particular ordinance is not the answer. I think Rod's idea of bringing together the community and the stakeholders involved might bring us some insight that we're missing here.
I've had a couple of discussions with a couple of landlords that live in my area, and they are concerned about the scope of this. What's their liability? Who's going to make the judgment as to when something goes over the line? What kind of recourse do they have? What kind of notice is going to happen? How is it going to affect their ability to rent out properties? And I think that the assertion that, well, this will only be used in egregious situations is true. I really think that they could probably trust the city in doing that, but on the other hand, they would have to trust the city that that's what's going to happen, that this is going to be enforced very selectively. So I guess that's the problem I have with this particular resolution, and I think the process as a whole needs to be much more inclusive.
Cindy, would you like to say a few words to this?
Yeah, I'm Cindy Campbell, and I live in one of the neighborhoods that's heavily populated by rental houses. I don't want to specifically target just that this is Wartburg. I think somehow or another that keeps coming to the surface, and I think it's any house that is being rented. And I think there should be guidelines that any landlord, just as they would not want a renter to come in and to tear out a wall or do something, that there should be guidelines that landlords put forth to their renters that they should be following. It disturbs me to think that we might be tabling this to wait to put together a task force to go through this. For someone who lives in this neighborhood and has had to endure quite a bit of this, I am not looking forward to another season coming up without some parameters. I think what I understood from our previous conversations, both the ones that I had with the mayor and some of the other city administration as well as the police department, this ordinance would give the police department an opportunity in which to enforce. And from my understanding, it isn't going to be some heavy hammer that would come down immediately on a violation, but at least it would give a process so that there would be some kind of control to behavior that is not fitting to a neighborhood, whether or not it is what the age groups are there. In our neighborhood, we are starting to get young families to come back in, which is pretty exciting for us. However, I feel like if we wait to put this dream team together to discuss this and find out what is the perfect situation, that it is a waste of time. I really feel like if landlords truly are concerned and care about the property that they own and the people that they are renting to, that this ordinance would certainly help. It has worked in other college towns from my understanding, and I really feel that we need this. I really have had it and would like to see something be done without waiting for, again, a task force of collected people. Not that that couldn't be put together. I still think that would be a great idea. But this ordinance now would make a difference on what is going to be happening in the season coming up for rental property. I appreciate your listening. Thank you.
Just want to clarify quick, sir, we mentioned this isn't distinctly to Wartburg. This is not distinctly the rentals either. This is homeowner occupied, single residence as well. And made the comment, I want to put it out there again, this is not just rentals. This is not just landlords. It's nothing like that. If your neighbor owns his house and he's a pain in the rear and this is happening all the time, just as subject as anyone else in this city, this can apply to that. So I just want to clarify that.
I want to also, James, the ordinance does not actually specify residential property either.
Correct.
So we're looking at ours. We're looking at commercial property that maybe is not being policed by the owners effectively.
That's correct.
So Rod, would you be open to the idea of our approving this proposal with the understanding that this can go into effect, at least for the short term, the near term, and that your other, I think, pretty good idea could still be explored, and if they discover that there's a better way to do it, that we could revisit this in the future? Have I made myself sufficiently confusing?
Yes, you have. I'm thinking. Sometimes my wheels turn very, very slowly, and they squeak.
Jason, do you have a comment you'd like to add to this before we move on?
Maybe.
Okay.
Thank you for your guys' time. I've lived here for almost 42 years, and I live next to rental property. I own rental property, and the ordinance is needed. I do think it does need to be ironed out a little bit. Dispersal of parties only causes foot traffic through residential properties and a line of trash and a line of urine. So it needs to pull back, think about it. There's already a rental ordinance involved. So if there's a problem landlord, his license should not be renewed. That's already in effect. So the penalty or the fee, the way I read it, first time offense. Well, I can't fix it if it's not broke, if I don't know it's broke. So in a nutshell, it needs to be done as a resident, as a landlord. I think it needs a little iron out a few things, make sure it is citywide, because there is rental property down by the swimming pool that are definitely issues. So it needs to be citywide, and it needs to stay that. The way I read it right now, it's landlords. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, we have two different items on the table right now. I think the first item, if I remember right, Rod has made a motion and it was seconded. So, and we've had a lot of discussion.
I'd like to answer Mike's question, if I could. I would prefer that this ordinance be delayed until it can be wordsmithed a little bit. I think it needs some work, that it's a little bit, that's too broad, too hasty, and really doesn't address the issues. But I'm not opposed to the idea of the ordinance. So if the only way that I could get the task force set up was to have the ordinance approved, I would do that. Because I believe the task force is the more important part of this.
Well, it might be one way to keep both you and Cindy happy.
I could never be unhappy with Cindy, so.
How do you decide who's on the task force? If
That's
it's,
the mayor's
if it's, if it applies to all households, rental owned, et cetera, and the people that probably need to be hearing the message are not going to be on the task force. So
That's kind of why I feel like it would be valuable to get an ordinance in place, if only to be that shot across the bow that you have to be paying attention to this, to get those people who should care, to get them to care about making sure that the ordinance is written correctly.
I guess I'd like to maybe hear from the police chief. You know, we heard a really, I thought, convincing and eloquent monologue by the officer who was here last time about how this could potentially be used. And I think a lot of this has to be left up to the individual officer's discretion about the situation they encounter and how they want to handle it. So I don't know, Rich, if you wanted to weigh in.
I'm definitely not elegant, so, but I can say a few things. I would think, one thing to remember about this particular ordinance, and to Jason's point, is he is correct. You know, there's certain things within the rental landlord code that helps those long-term things, that is worked through the zoning. When you read this ordinance, a lot of the emphasis is put on is stopping the activity at the time. It's about ongoing activity and giving the city and law enforcement the ability to do certain things that they currently aren't allowed to do, to break that up. And so where I see the advantages to other ordinances, this gives you a tool that we currently do not have to stop that ongoing problem. I'm not sure if I have, but if you have any direct questions or not, but
What Jason had said was, you know, most landlords would like to be notified, if it is a landlord situation, would be notified that this is happening before getting a fine.
Yeah, I've talked to a couple landlords, and I think Sergeant Leisinger mentioned it when he was here. I kind of briefed him on this ordinance coming up, the review of it, and our initial procedures on how we handle loud noise complaint would be exactly the same as it is today. You know, you go there, you try to get it broke up, and I would say 90% of the time, that's effective. You know, the cops show up, the kids leave. It's the repeat offenders. It's, all right, now we gotta go back a second time. There are no other nuisance ordinances that we can affect the property, the person that's in possession of it, like the kids that are renting it, or, you know what, this particular parents leave every weekend and their kids have a party every weekend. So they are in control of that property, and we have the ability, through this ordinance, we could affect that. Otherwise, you're looking, when you kick the anthill, you're trying to catch public intoxes, open containers, and so you're just grabbing on the outskirts of these issues where, you know, you could get there that first time, talk to the kids or whoever's in control of that home and say, we come back, we've done their complaint tonight, you're gonna be under fine, we can, for this early house. And it gives us another tool, because, you know, what's supplying alcohol to a minor? What's a loud noise complaint? Is it the homeowner, or is it the kids that are standing out in the front yard? And when they take off running, then what do? Our guys get tired of chasing people through the neighborhoods.
I have a question to Rod in all of this. Where could you just point to something that you think needs cleaning up, or I don't quite understand, I guess, what you're getting at?
Oh, okay. Look at the language of the proposed section. No person shall permit or suffer to continue any quarreling. Okay, how can you not, you know, what does that mean? That you can't permit any quarreling? That seems extremely broad to me. Are they talking about people shouting at each other, or public disruption? You know, and then the sanction. Let me see with the section here. I'm sorry, I should have reviewed this before, but the person who would let's see. Upon issuance of a criminal complaint for a violation of the section, any peace officer. That's not the section I was looking for.
I mean, under the civil sanction, I think it actually defines quarreling and some of that further, because it goes on to say that threatens injury to persons or damage to property or loud rock and so on. So, I mean, it's a little bit more defined, perhaps. I guess, okay, so that just gives me an example of what you're talking about, and, you know, maybe there is room, I'm not sure, but maybe there is room for improving the language here. I guess where I am at this point on this, having listened to the conversation so far, is that I probably wouldn't support your amendment, Rod, but I would say that if we can postpone this for you and whoever else wants to be involved to make some of those language changes, to bring it back to us to our next meeting, I'd be okay with that, which wouldn't delay it, you know, forever, but we'd still be working with this basic ordinance. We'd address the language issues that you think may not be fair or not clear enough, and we simultaneously then start a task force, but also act on this this ordinance relatively quickly with improvements that you could help us identify and make stronger or clearer or whatever.
We do have an extra Monday this month, so we have 3 weeks to our next regular meeting for a third reading.
It'll be early August, it'll be the third reading.
Oh, yeah, that's right. What is this? This is a second reading?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, okay, so that, yeah. So we could, I mean, we could go ahead and approve this, right, but ask for a revised document for the third and final reading?
You can discuss that again in the third reading and make that
Yeah.
at the time as well. I mean, that's why we have three. You
Yeah.
can progress and make
Yeah.
changes accordingly, and we can have a discussion again in August 6th, I think it is.
Yeah, I'd be more in favor of that so that we have an ordinance in place and yet also pursue the whole notion of an advisory committee.
My whole point under this is not to, I mean, it seems like I'm trying to be obstructionist, I'm not, because I think that that's a very good solution to this problem. But my whole point on this is that by the time it comes to a loud noise complaint, it's too late. There's also already been a failure. What we need to do is talk about what things can we do to prevent those things from actually occurring in the first place.
So maybe that's this task force.
Yes, exactly. So maybe they are two completely separate issues, and we can go forward with this. And while I'm on vacation next week, I can look through this and see if there
Yeah.
any wording that I would like to wordsmith on this. You know how us attorneys are, we like to do that, so.
You sure you want to spend your vacation doing that?
No, I'm not going to. I'll wait till I get back. But to me, the important part of this is the task force, and that's what I want to see taken away from this. So if we can split those off and have those as two separate issues, I would, and be able to maybe tighten up the language on this a little bit on the third reading, I would have no problems with that.
I would just be cautious about tightening up the language too much, because I think if you try to be too specific, it's going to render it
Unenforceable.
not enforceable. So I think reading the whole paragraph as I was just dissecting it again, I think it's specific enough for what the officers might need in defining what's disturbing. So I would just be careful with wordsmithing too much. But I think a task force is almost a separate issue.
I appreciate the turn the conversation seems to have taken. I do agree. I mean, I go back to our earlier conversation. I believe someone stated or inferred that President Colton wasn't even aware of some of these issues. So that tells me there's a disconnect between at least the college and the community that probably needs to be addressed. I just don't know that doing that makes the end results here any different or better. I think it will help lessen the number of times this may need to be pulled out of the toolbox if we can get a better understanding amongst all the parties, but I still think this is a valuable tool to have now sooner than later, so.
And if it's helpful, I assured the landlords, we can't write this into the ordinance because you don't write in how many times you're going to give somebody a verbal warning, how many times you're going to give somebody a written warning for any city violation. But I told them and I assured them that at no time would, an owner of a property just receive a ticket in the mail and without ever being called. I mean, that just isn't the way that any of us operate. So to me, it had to be something egregious where, we've tried calling letters, certified mail, you have an issue, no response, that somebody could make that claim that, well, I never was really talked to. But if they live here in town or if they're connected at all to the community, they're going to be talked to by either somebody from law enforcement or from the city prior to ever receiving something in the mail in reference to this particular part of the disorderly house.
Okay. Let's,
Can I just clarify? So Rod, you're going to suggest some language. Are you planning to present that at the meeting or prior to, so that the rest of the council has time to review?
Oh, if I do that, and that is still an if, I would have it to you before the agenda went out.
Thank you.
okay, we have an amendment, so to speak, on the table. Motion made and seconded.
What I would suggest is that we defeat that amendment, and if I, or
I could withdraw
withdraw
it.
it if the consent of the person. But I would also like to go forward with some kind of formal acknowledgement of setting up a advisory committee as I suggested. I don't know how we do that.
And the advisory committee is to address which problem?
Address the issues of disorderly properties.
What I would suggest is, I mean, you're saying you're withdrawing this now, right, Rod?
Yes.
Okay, and you're agreeing, right? Okay. So if that's done, then it would be good for us to react to something in writing, I think, about an advisory council. And if you have some specific things in mind, maybe you could share those orally or in writing with city staff, and either they have something in writing to share with the rest of us as an agenda item, or they could write it up, help you write it up, something along those lines?
Within our council rules and procedures, that he could basically ask the mayor to set up a task force.
I see. Okay,
The mayor
so
has
we
that-
wouldn't even need to approve anything.
The mayor has
Okay.
that obligation or
Perfect.
that option
Yeah.
to set up a task force.
Okay.
And
But-
I would second Rod asking for a task force
Yeah.
to look at that.
And I think,
With a charge, to get to Ann's question, I think also not just who's on it, but what is it that they're charged to do?
yeah. I think I need to, if we're going to go that route, to have some discussions with Bill possibly, and you and Bill can talk about some things, and I can sit in on it, as far as that goes, and then we can kind of formulate that from there. And, but I think that, what I understand and what the residents of particularly the northwest part of Waverly want is something in place before school starts. And if we're going to include, quote, Wartburg students, obviously they need to be here before we can do that. So, okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second for ordinance 1049, adding a section on keeping disorderly house. Roll call vote, please.
Bergen.
Yes.
Drinkow.
Yes.
Angus.
Yes.
McKenzie.
Yes.
Rafi.
Yes.
Chair.
Yes.
Waldstein. Yes.
Motion carried. Moving on, reports from boards and commissions. Golf Commission minutes from June 12th, 2018. Any input? Received in the record. Senior calendar for July of 2018.
Regarding those minutes, I'm sorry, we're going to put some revisions in. At the meeting in July, they said something about, we didn't have some language in there about potential learning center, driving range type stuff. So I've added some words to that.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Deb. Senior calendar from July 2018.
I see that there's cribbage tomorrow. I think I may show up for that.
You're not quite a senior,
But
Yes,
it says, yeah, all welcome.
That's right, all welcome.
So,
I also my wife and I partook of the meal on Tuesday, and they had a record number almost of sort of 82 people there, so it was Oh, I'm
98,
sorry.
wow.
Well, I was told 92, or 82, so the numbers keep going up.
maybe I've had a few people in another room in the back. You couldn't see.
Magnell forgot to count a couple then, so. Okay. City council comments. I'm sorry, staff comments. It's on a different page.
I don't believe we have any, sir.
Okay, very good. City council comments?
I have one. This seems like the night when doing a lot of talking, so I apologize for that. But I'm sure that all of the rest of you have received as many comments as I've had about the fireworks over the 4th of July. That was a lot of fireworks were being shot off in a blatantly irresponsible manner. Dangerous, and I could tell you all the incidents of what people told me happened, but I think that this is an issue that we're going to have to take a look at again before the next 4th of July.
In answer to that comment, Rod, there is an item on the agenda for the July 23rd study session, particularly to address fireworks while it's fresh in our minds.
Do we have, and I was going to ask the chief this, and I got caught up last week with other things going on, to have this, do we know how many citations were issued over the firework period?
No, because we're not heavy-handed, right? A lot of warnings. Like I said before, the complaints that we got that came out prior to the ordinance being effective was a lot of individuals that don't follow city council and weren't aware that we changed from state law. So after they were warned and advised, they, those particular ones stopped. I did write down that we had 45 calls for service from June 1st to July 8th, and of those 45, 27 would have been in violation of our ordinance. And so, like I said during an interview with Amelia, depending what number you're shooting for, that was kind of bad, wasn't it? But 38 days of when we took the recording, there's 27 legitimate complaints. So do you want to try to narrow that, increase it? But that's where the numbers are at.
But I guess I would ask how many actually then wound up with citations.
We didn't issue any citations because everybody that we went out to stopped for that night.
I think certainly there were a few that fell out of the time frames, but to me, the complaints I got were more irresponsible use of them, too close to buildings, under trees.
People didn't clean up their debris.
Yeah. Again, how do you write an ordinance to make people good neighbors? I don't know. But
Okay.
We're talking about the public housing or the nuisance housing too, so.
Any other council comments?
Just a reminder, the Heritage Days are this coming weekend, so think sunny, nice weather, and it starts Thursday night.
That it does. Right at 9:30 Saturday morning.
10. You might have to,
10:30.
is it 10:30? You might have to show up.
Early. I was told, and I believe it's in the booklet, at 10:30.
10:30, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I hope so, because there are a lot of my family coming from Des Moines to take part in that. Okay. Mayor's comments. Dan touched on the Heritage Days Parade. I hope the weather is good. Rod touched on the fireworks, and that is on the agenda for the July 23rd study session. So no reason to postpone it. And everyone has a horror story to tell about it, and I'm sure. But other than that, I don't believe we have anything. I have anything else further? Oh, we have a new zoning administrator. We'll start July 30th New HR director will start July 30th, share with high school, so we're well on our way to fulfilling a lot of our obligations. Very good. Meeting adjourned. No, I'm sorry. Let's not go back and have a motion then. We are adjourned.
Mayor's done, we're good.
Yes.